All right, here we go. All month long, we've been taking a look at some of the other content creators out there in Commanders Land. One of my favorites today, Street Scores. Rico, what is happening, my friend?
What's good, man? Football, man. We in the full swing of things. Yes, sir.
It's exciting. Let's see. How long has the channel been around? What made you kind of get started with it? We'd like to get to know you a little bit before we start talking ball.
Yes, sir. I started it back May 2017. I went to St. John's University in New York, and then my friend got me to come to like the radio show and talk some sports stuff. And I realized it was more fun than I thought it would be. So once I moved back to Atlanta, I was like, I might as well just keep the momentum going, talk about my Commanders, well, Redskins, football team, wherever we were at the time. And then now I'm starting to get into my Bulldog with another channel as
I was going to say, you and I are similar that way. We're both Commanders fans. We're both huge Bulldog fans. Um, I won't ask you if you prefer one to the other. There it is.
well.
Time, time, time for three of them. Time for three of them.
Yes, sir.
When it came time to start a podcast, though, I did the same thing, and I'm not sure I even have an answer for it. So I'll be curious to hear what yours is. You could have chosen either one. The last 4 years, it had definitely been a lot easier to do a Bulldog podcast than a Commanders podcast. How did you end up choosing Commanders over the Bulldogs for your podcast, at least?
Well, I'm a Commanders fan first, well, Redskins technically, but because like my whole family, I was born in Maryland. My mom and their whole generation is straight Maryland, so they're Redskins, Commanders fans, and all of that. So it just felt more natural. Now that Georgia's so great, it just feels like I kind of have to. But the Redskins win, lose, 0-17, whatever, I'm still talk about them and be just as passionate.
They shouldn't be 0-17. It feels fresh.
Mhm.
How have you felt since the new ownership changed? I've heard a lot of different mixed reviews on like how excited they were. Were they excited? As excited? What did you think when the news finally came out that it was done deal, ownership transferred, and maybe how does he look so far in his first couple months on the job?
Well, excitement is an easy word, but I feel like more specifically for me at least, relief. I mean, things just seem more professional. I'm not sure if you've seen, but we have the new Verizon sponsor now already. We already got that going, probably many more to come. And he's at the practices all the time. I've seen him at like 5 already. He was there at the day one with the joint practice with the Ravens with Mitchell Rails and Joe Gibbs. We now have, instead of us trying our hardest to find what state or city may want a new stadium, now they're fighting over us. We had like the Virginia governor come to practice one time, campaigning, please come to Virginia. We've had Maryland, at DC. So it's just a complete 180 as far as professionalism. They already have like a set budget for how they're going to not only work on the next stadium, but how they're also going to improve FedEx Field this year and for the coming years until we get to the new stadium. So just well-run organization inside and out. I'm really excited about more than anything else how professional we look. We feel standard. Most teams take this stuff for granted, but now we
Right.
look like a standard professional team. Nothing exceptional, but just standard and professional.
And it was nice, like, it was cool to see him, standing behind the team stand in the stands behind the team bench in that first preseason game. Most of the
Yeah.
owners up there in a box somewhere. It was cool to see him down there during the game, like, actually being excited about being a fan. That was the one thing that always got me about Dan, right? Like, you bought your favorite football team. First of all, what
Mm.
world does that happen, right? Like you literally that you bought your favorite football team growing up, and it felt like he had no fun. Like you'd have thought that'd have been the most fun, right? And it just looked like he had a
Exactly.
horrible time doing it. The new guy, although it's new, looks like he's having a good time being the owner, of his favorite football team. The other thing they can do is, you talked about the joint practices up there in Baltimore, where supposedly the facilities are just top notch, that he can totally, before he has to worry about stadiums, which probably doesn't have to happen until 2030, and changes in the front office, things he can do right now is they totally can start working on building new facilities. He had talked about, how FedEx is kind of the house and you got to make sure your house looks nice when people come over. Well, you mentioned Verizon, when you're trying to get those corporate sponsors, having your headquarters be top notch is also important. They could do something about that real soon. And it's things like that that kind of get me excited about this guy, Mitchell Rails, who, has history in building stuff and Magic. I mean, how many resources, how many people does Magic know?
Yeah, just from being likable. And speaking of immediate impact, like what we can do now, I mean, even just the stands that we have at our training camp now, where it seats so many people and there's more access for fans to come in and actually have a place to feel like where they belong and like the Commanders care. They have all kinds of stuff like cornhole for people to play, team store. Like training camp is just a more fan service driven event now completely. So um like you acknowledge, a lot of things are going to be long term, but there are some things that we can change immediately. We've already seen a couple, so I'm very excited.
Now you've got the daily reports coming out on the channel. Tell me about like what goes into them. Tell the people that are watching, because I don't think all the time, it seems like it's easy to do podcasts, and I'm not saying it's hard, but to do one well, what goes into the planning for the podcast each day? How do you put it together? I'm kind of curious about your process.
Man, it's quite a bit. That's pretty much what I've been doing all day, other than cutting the grass in the backyard. Since I've been awake at like 9-ish, it's been nothing but working on videos. And the video right now that I just did is going to be like 50 minutes long is just now starting to upload to my computer before I even start to upload it to YouTube. So the editing process alone took like an hour, 2 hours. The recording itself took like an hour. Getting my notes together was like the previous 4 or 5 hours of what I was going to talk about. So yeah, it's a lot more work than a lot of people probably believe it is. Definitely far more time consuming than what people believe as well.
There is nothing more frustrating than waiting for those videos to download and then having to download them again. Like it's a kick in the pants every time. I wish they'd figure out a way to make it faster. What's the season's coming? It's odd. It's like the Vegas number is set at 6.5 wins for the season. It feels it doesn't just feel low, it kind of feels like disrespectful a little bit. Like
Exactly.
the team was 8-1 last year. They didn't score 20 points a game with a quarterback that, nobody in the league is going to start. And yet somehow we're 2.5 games behind that this year. What is it, do you think, that Vegas sees that the fans don't see to put the number that low?
Honestly, I do not know. Because to your point, going 8-1, new offensive coordinator, I feel like that's already an improvement. We're already seeing that going into the Ravens practice. Even Ravens reporters have talked about how the Commanders seem even more prepared than the Ravens, let alone what they would have been compared to our 2022 Commanders like Scott Turner and Rivera and those guys. And then quarterback, I'm very excited about Sam Howell's ceiling, mobility, everything that we can do with the offense with him. I just feel like naturally that should at least win us one more game than last year. On the Vegas end of things, I have absolutely no idea. Maybe it's just popular to hate on the burgundy and gold, even with all of these new changes. Maybe it's just keep business running as usual. Just copy and paste the article you did last year and keep it pushing.
It does feel like there's a lot of copying, pasting going on. But it also
Exactly.
feels like, why can't I tweeted this the other day. Like, haven't we earned as a fans getting a fifth round pick, like a first round quarterback in the fifth round? Like, haven't we earned that? It looks early on like Hal's kind of got a little thing going. It feels like the whole team has got a little swagger this year that maybe we haven't had in a while. I wonder if part of that is, Ron Rivera is back to just being able to be a football coach. He doesn't have to put out fires. He's not being the head of football ops. He's not, by all accounts, picking the players. He's got great input. Don't get me wrong. I think he's got a ton of input still on the team. But maybe it's a part of him just being back to being the leader of men that he always is. It could do that. And then, of course, who knows what the effect EB's got on the team, right? But it feels like they shut down practice earlier. I heard Ron say it was because we had already gotten through everything we wanted. We were 15 minutes early because everybody was moving fast. Feels like, I don't know about you, Rico, but I don't remember seeing it like that around here in a minute.
No, and just to go back to Rivera, I completely agree. I feel like the less he has to worry about, the better he'll be at what he should worry about. I feel like we're not spreading them thin anymore. Because remember, way back, he was trying to be Bill Belichick, the GM, head coach, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, everything. Then we brought in like Chris Polian, Marty Herney, Martin Mayhew to kind of split that up, the GM side. And then now this year, he's completely humbled himself and brought in not only an offensive coordinator, but technically assistant head coach in Eric Bieniemy. And the way they practice is completely led and influenced by how Eric Bieniemy wants to practice. To your point about we're finishing practices early, don't remember that ever being a thing, ever. If anything, they felt like we didn't get enough done, but we're just going to stop now because we're legally obligated by the NFLPA to not overwork you guys. But right now, we're like, well, that was great. We're good. I mean, y'all earned it. You know, get some extra time off. We're done early.
You mentioned humbled, and I think it's an important word. I think it's a great word to use when talking about Rivera. Was the one thing, Gruden had some teams where if they'd got the defensive coordinator right, those teams could have been really good. And Gruden wasn't willing to hire a man that could take his job. He just wasn't going to do it. Yeah. And for Ron to say, listen, the offense wasn't good enough. What was it just last year? They gave Turner that extension, right? So, I mean, it's like they really Ron really went out there on this one and said, all right, we're going to hire the best guy we can. It was like him and Monken for the Ravens job. And the Ravens waited a little bit, and we gave Ron all the power that he wanted. But for him to bring in EB, I think says a lot about Ron and how important he knows this season is. How do you like what are your thoughts on the EB hire, and how do you like it so far?
Man, I absolutely love it. Again, to your point, just the fact that Ron Rivera was able to put his ego to the side, not worried about his job security, and just hired the best man available.
That's not an easy thing to do.
At all. In any profession, let alone sports, where all of the cameras are looking at you. Everybody's like, well, if Eric Bieniemy has the offense, Jack Del Rio has the defense, Martin Mayhew is technically the GM, why are you here? So I think that's great on his part to make that decision and allow us to be the best team we can be, whatever ends up being the result for him at the end of it. But I think if we win, I think he'll be fine. He's a motivator, and man, you just can't typically find that everywhere, especially to the level that Ron Rivera does it, where guys are willing to run through a wall. We never seem like at the end of seasons that we've given up. We may lack talent, we may make a lot of mistakes, but it doesn't seem like the players give up on Ron Rivera like some head coaches have to do.
Oh, never. It doesn't feel like that.
But Eric Bieniemy's super excited.
You say they're still involved and excited at the end, and I tend to agree with you.
Yeah.
If they get off to faster starts, they wouldn't have to worry about some of that stuff. You watch this team as much as anybody. I've asked a lot of people this question. Why is it that Ron Rivera, all the way back to Carolina, can't get off to a good start? Because he'll have to this year, I think.
I completely agree. Josh Harris, new owner. I mean, Ron Rivera's already experienced it, getting fired mid-season as a head coach after a new owner buys a team. So we have to start quicker. I wish I knew exactly why we started slow, because I feel like if we knew, we would stop doing it. And that's the answer
I get every time now.
Yeah. It's definitely he's definitely a repeat offender of the starting slow, and then we always have to rally mid-season. Then we kind of tell off like the last couple of games, but we might win the last one to kind of take some momentum into the next season. That just seems like a written script for us, written by the NFL, that we just had to abide by, I guess.
That's
hopefully we can get out of that this year.
I'd like to get a new script for sure. To get there, and let's call it, well, first of all, what do you think it takes for Ron Rivera and company to keep their jobs this year?
I think playoffs at minimum. Now, granted, we sent 3 teams to the playoffs last year, and we had the worst record in Division 8-1, which is ridiculous. We were the best division in football easily, I feel like, objectively. Even Brett Coleman, who has no attachment to the NFC East at all, I think he's like a Steelers fan, and they like broke down like advanced statistics as to why this is one of the best divisions in football history. And I guess we're gonna have to supersede somebody to take one of those 3 spots, because maybe we send 3 again next year. I just don't think we send 8. And I think we have the ability to do that. I mean, we should have won at least one of those Giants games, even though the Eagles game was a surprise. Maybe we split with the Cowboys or something. You got to win those division games, but I think we're good enough to, at the very least, make it into like a wild card spot this season. If you don't do that, then we'll probably move on from Ron Rivera. And depending on how Sam Howell looks, maybe they just go ahead and draft a quarterback with supposedly a really good draft. But I hope we don't even have to have those discussions because I love Sam Howell with the role that Ron Rivera has now. I love him in that because also I feel like what goes very underrated is that Andy Reid even said that Eric Bieniemy handled a lot of the time management stuff, like situational football, 2-minute offense, controlling the timeouts and things like that, or at least advising the timeouts.
Right.
That's one of our biggest problems with Ron Rivera last year. So if Eric Bieniemy can help with that as well, that's going to be huge.
It's funny that you mentioned Brett Coleman. He actually works for the Chargers, but his podcast is incredible. He was on the show, said that he thought the only reason that first, there's never been a fifth rounder to do it, which is tough. There's a reason for that, although he couldn't
Mhm.
explain what the reason was, other than the numbers just show that. But also, the reason that we don't get to where we're going this year is because the offensive line won't let us get there. What can they do to kind of help the offensive line if indeed that's going to be a weak part of the team this year? Do you think
A
it will
lot
be
of
a weak part of the team this year? They're going to have trouble there.
Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic about the offensive line than most people. So I wouldn't say it's going to be the weakest position group because I think we're going to be a really good team. I would just say it is the position group I'm the most worried about. Um, and I just feel like for 3 reasons, this offensive line may be better than a lot of people think. I'm not saying they're going to go out there and be a top 5, top 10 unit at all, but I do feel like a lot of fans feel like it's going to be one of the bottom 5 units. I feel like Tom, first of all, they're going to get better. I feel like offensive line isn't just talent; it's chemistry. To be able to pick up stunts and twists and all kinds of blitzes and
Yep.
things like that, you need to have chemistry with the guy to the left and the right with you. Our offensive line is pretty much completely different from last year, except for Charles Leno starting the left tackle because even Samuel Cosme moved from right tackle to right guard. So there's going to be time to get the chemistry better. I'm hearing a lot of things about our offensive line probably had their best day today out of the entire offseason. And even going back to the Browns game, probably blown a little out of proportion how bad they were. They started to get better as time went on. Second point, Eric Bieniemy making adjustments. We saw in that third drive where we scored the touchdown that Sam Howell was getting the ball out of his hands quicker. We asked him to roll outside of the pocket instead of just sitting there getting beat up because Andrew Wiley was just a turnstile. So I like the fact that Eric Bieniemy also can mitigate the ineffectiveness of the offensive line just by simply changing the play call and the play designs. And then also Sam Howell's mobility is going to be big time for us. The fact that he can make sidearm throws without even setting his feet while on the run, I think that's going to be big time for how much this offensive line is able to go out there and perform. I'm not worried about them run blocking wise. I think they're really good run blockers already. We're just worried about the pass protection.
And I think that also what's going to help them is, and first of all, for us, you are totally right about Bieniemy and the adjustments, because I remember thinking at the time, whoa, coach is making adjustments on the fly in game. That's something. And also in a preseason game, it was like, whoa, this guy's out here really coaching them up, which I was fast. That's the one thing about the last guy. We won't spend a lot of time on him because he's gone, but the offense didn't work. He didn't know how to put plays together. He had no feel for the game. That was his problem with Bieniemy. You can kind of feel that he's got a sense of the flow of the game, what's working. And remember, if Bates doesn't drop that pass, and I'm still mad at Bates because I spent all last week hyping him up as a guy to watch out for, and then he drops it on me. But they were rolling on that drive.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like they
Andrew
were
Wiley, I
moving.
believe, had a holding penalty as well, but that drop killed that drive,
Brutal.
completely killed the momentum. But
Yeah.
to your point, John Bates had a great day today in practice. Like he had a contested catch. I think he caught like 3 or 4 targets today against the Ravens. So to your point, he may redeem himself in this upcoming game against the Ravens on Monday night.
Well, and the reason I think you can kind of stash a guy like Bates on some of your deeper like fantasy teams, if they're going to be the run blocking team that they say they are, they're going to run the ball. John Bates is the best blocking tight end on the team. So just the fact that he's going to be out there more, and you'll assume that they'll be running play action off that. Just by sheer being out there, he's going to get more target shares than the guys that are only out there on passing downs. So I think that's
Great
another
point.
thing to think about with Bates. And then I guess I would think that Cole Turner's tight end won by halfway through the season.
I could see that. With Logan Thomas out, and they're saying it's like an abundance of caution, like it's nothing serious. They just don't want to make it worse. But Cole Turner is definitely going to be one of our primary red zone threats because first of all, we don't really have any tall receivers like that. We have Bryson Tremaine and Marcus Kemp fighting for it's like 9 guys fighting for the last 2 spots. Maybe one of
Yeah.
those tall guys get it. Outside of them, everybody's like 6'1" or shorter. So Cole Turner in the tight end room will probably get a lot of those red zone targets, especially if Logan Thomas is dealing with injuries or whatever. And he's shown the ability, it hasn't translated into the regular season yet, but this is the second offseason in a row, only his second offseason in his career so far, that he's looked great. Like he's one of Sam Howell's favorite targets. It's like him, Jahan Dotson, and Logan Thomas right now. I think Sam Howell's going to throw the ball to the tight ends a lot. And I think with him being a really good, potentially receiving threat, he will be the recipient of a lot of those.
It's crazy you say that. It got me to thinking that you're right. Other than a couple of fringe guys at the bottom, like Pringle, they don't have anybody really tall. On the other side of that, the tight end room, I don't think they have anybody under 6'6" in the tight end room.
Yeah,
So it's like,
it's a
when
great
they get
point.
down, those tight ends ought to be getting some work. Who ends up with more touchdowns on the season? Terry, Dotson, or Gibson?
Ooh, I think we're a better team if it's Gibson. But I think if I had to put my money on it, it would be Terry. The reason I say Gibson, if we would be a better team, because if we have him that involved in like the passing game, running game, everything, I mean, I'll never forget that 80-yard screen against the Bills. That was one of the only things that went right for us. And
That's
if
right.
he's that dual threat, you have to worry about him, account for him every play he's on the field. I think that will make our offense more balanced, open things up for Sam Howell in the passing game to be for other people to be open. So I think ideally, if Antonio Gibson leads our team in touchdowns, I think we would be a more productive offense overall. But I feel like it's safe to say Terry because I also think he's going to be one of our deep threats as well.
The number that's interesting, and I've been saying it all off season. The back there in Kansas City, McKissick. It's not McKissick. It's JD, and it's not JD McKissick. McKisson was the second leading receiver of touchdowns for Kansas City with 9. So if that's the Gibson role, then and that was just the receiving touchdowns. I don't have anything to do with the goal line work. So I am really curious to see if this is the year that Gibson breaks out, because it's
And to
probably
add to that,
the last year we see him, right?
oh yeah, with the contract coming up, this is his last year. I hope we pay him. But to add to your point, somebody showed the statistics. I think out of like 11 snaps Brian Robinson had in that preseason game against the Browns, he was running routes on like 8 of them. Like he was more involved in the passing game than the running game in that preseason game. And the same thing went for Antonio Gibson. It was like 6 of his 8 or 5 of his 8 or something like that. So this new Eric Bieniemy offense, these running backs are going to be out there running.
I'm fascinated to see how it looks, because we haven't had an offense that isn't run heavy. And I really don't expect this, as much as we talk and as much as we've heard about being run heavy and running the ball and controlling the line of scrimmage. I think they're going to do that with short passes, right? They're going to get the ball, 3-step drops, balls out of his hands quickly to guys in space to let them do what they do best. I don't know that this is one of those deals where you're going to find 25 carries a game for all the backs combined.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really hard. I think maybe in the beginning, just to see where Sam Howell's at, or maybe a day he struggles. But I don't think on a good average day, we'll be running the ball as much as they've said. I think we're just too talented. We have too many receivers. Our running backs are really talented and underrated in the receiving game. I mean, I think I heard Logan Paulson say that they have Brian Robinson running choice routes, like where he
Yeah.
decides
Yeah.
based on the coverage what route he's going to run. Like that's a lot of responsibility and trust in your running back to give him that type of decision making on his own in the passing game. So I definitely feel like we just have too much explosion potential in the receiving game. Sam Howell, even himself, I'm too excited, and I think they're going to take advantage of a lot of the weapons we have.
Well, they didn't score 20 points a game last year, so it feels like they can only go up from there. Let's
By default.
let's switch to the defense a little bit before we get out of here. It's big years for both Montez Sweat and Chase Young. Who do you think has the bigger year?
That's tough. I mean, I feel like the safest answer is Montez Sweat. Just because Chase Young with injuries or whatever, he's even a little banged up right now. And then Montez Sweat's problem has always been that he's been one step away. I think at
Yes.
some point last year he was leading the league in pressures. I don't think he finished
Yes.
that way, but at one point he did. And I think with a vastly improved secondary, if anything, at least depth wise, where I don't feel like we're just one injury away from our secondary collapsing, I think that extra step he can get there because the quarterback will have to hesitate just a little bit because of all of the talent we have in the secondary. So I feel like this is Montez Sweat's year. I feel like also with Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen receiving all pro votes, even though neither of them made it, I think teams are definitely going to focus on doing whatever they can and stop them, which is going to allow Montez Sweat and Chase Young to have a little bit more fun on the outside.
I agree. It'll be interesting to see with Chase Young. I don't. There is a way to pay both of them if they're really good this year. I don't know that that's the best way to allocate your money that way. It seems like a whole lot of money. I think they'd prefer if Montez was really good and they could pay him and then let Chase Young go. I think. I think maybe he meshes well. And see, this is an interesting thing about new ownership and the possibility of new coaching staffs. How do you push the money around? Who do you put your resources into? Like maybe the new guy would prefer the profile of Chase Young. I think he's got more upside to him. Cam Curls due up for a contract. He's very good when he's on the field here. The defense doesn't play nearly as well. They don't win nearly as much when he's not on the field. He's got no turnovers. Maybe the new guy will feel like I can't pay a safety that doesn't get turnovers. Now, again, may not be fair since they asked him to play in the box so much. But I think some of these guys where the contracts are due will be very interesting this year. Where do you stand on kind of Cam Curl and how he fits into things?
That's a great point about the like when it comes to contract negotiations, he doesn't have the stats, like the shiny stats that he can present to like ask for more money. But to exactly like you said, he's a very pivotal part of this defense. It's almost like the Brandon Sheriff effect, where it's like if he's on the field, even if he's a
Yes.
little banged up, we just play better. We just win. Like it's just results that way. So those are the stats I guess he would have to bring up in contract negotiations. I think we need to pay him. I say pay him before this season even starts because the price is only going to get higher. First of all, I just think he's going to have a more productive year. Like you said, with him playing in the box in previous years, Ron already said in a press conference, like I think before the draft, he was like, "We want Cameron Curl to play more strong safety today and be in the box a little less because we want him to stay healthier for the reasons that when he's healthy, we tend to win more." And also on top of that, every offseason, the market resets itself. There's going to be a safety that gets paid that raises the average like per year money. And then he's going to look at that and reference that and be like, I need to be making at the very least a certain percentage of what this guy is making, which is going to be higher than what it is today.
Okay. So Marcus Williams from the Ravens last year signed 5 years, I think $72 million. It got somewhere to about right around 16 million a year, made him the 10th highest paid safety in the league. Are you paying Cam Curl $16 million a year?
I would hope it would have to be that, but I kind of would be. Because I really do. I'm a big Cameron Crowe fan, and then to
I
be a
answer, and I
seventh
bring it
round
up on the
pick,
podcast. I think people probably think I'm not. I am. It's a big number
yeah,
for a strong safety. I think I'd pay
exactly.
it too, but I was just curious your thoughts.
Yeah, he's so important to this defense. And then just a homegrown player, just to send that message to your team, seventh round pick, you put in the work, we pay you. I mean, we've done a good job of paying
Yep.
Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Terry McLaurin to send a message to the rest of the team. If you work hard, we will pay you. Cameron McCurl, I just feel like sends an even stronger message like that. But to your point, we have so many other guys to pick. Kendall Fuller, Antonio Gibson, Curtis Samuel. We have so many guys' contracts ending after this season.
And I don't think any. I was thinking quickly of the guys you mentioned. I don't think any of them will be back. I don't think
Man,
he
that would
gives
be
second
crazy.
contracts to running backs. So I don't see Gibson back unless he turns into that third down back that maybe doesn't require a ton of money. Curtis Samuel. Listen, I think the league has shown you just draft running or wide receivers every year. You have to draft one because I mean guys like Terry are starting to make 20 million a year, right? Like Jahan Dotson in 3 years, 4 years is going to need 20 by then it's probably $25 million a year. You can't give Curtis Samuel 12, right? So you just let those guys, you got to draft them. And so I think it'll be interesting. I don't think any of those guys, Kendall Fuller turns 29, 30. You've got to be ready to move on. Who starts opposite of Forbes outside this year, do you think?
I would prefer Benjamin St. Juice, just based off of just looking at purely what he did against AJ Brown last year alone.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Completely took him out of one of those games. And he just has a special skill set where I love Forbes and I really like Fuller, but nobody else is just this super long 6'3" with great hips, changing direction skills like a Benjamin St. Juice. I mean, he has a certain niche. If you have like the DK Metcalfs, the Keenan Allens, the big, tall jump ball receivers like the Mike Evans, Benjamin St. Juice is your best chance of covering them. I prefer like Emmanuel Forbes on like a Devonta Smith, Brandon Cooks, those type of guys. So I would prefer if it's Benjamin St. Juice, but they've been so far experimenting with Benjamin St. Juice in the slot, but he's definitely better on the outside, in my opinion.
I think their hopes is that when the second round pick out of Illinois, I'm blanking on his name, Quan Martin,
Quan
when
Martin.
he's ready, I know people give him a hard time. They're asking a lot of him. Remember, Cam kind of had that same problem. That they asked the Buffalo nickel to do a whole lot, right? Like it's like a lot of linebacker stuff, it's a lot of safety stuff, it's a lot of corner stuff, tough position. So those folks out there being hard on Martin, I relax on that a little bit. But to me, and I've said this over and over again, St. Juice is not a nickel corner. Fuller is, for whatever reason, was and isn't anymore. That's why he ended up being outside again. He was terrible when they put him in the slot last year, which is why when I've said this repeatedly too, which is why when they drafted Forbes, I thought, oh, they're gonna have to draft somebody that can play nickel because neither of those two guys that we got really can play the nickel. I'm with you. I think I like St. I know I like St. Juice better outside. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. The problem was Fuller was really good out there at the end of last year too. Having too many good safety or corners and safeties probably isn't a bad thing though.
Yeah, great problem to have. I'm pretty sure they're going to keep them into a heavy rotation and maybe even just opponent based. Like if the other
Sure.
team doesn't have a tall receiver, maybe they play Kendall Fuller more. But
Sure.
ideally, Benjamin St. Juice, Emmanuel Forbes, and Quan Martin in the slot once he's ready give you the highest ceiling, I feel like.
Right. And they're going to give Percy Butler a lot of work this year.
Yeah, I like him. I like the
I do
speed. He
too.
looked really good against the backups on in the Browns preseason game. I'm excited about him.
I think he's in for kind of like that breakout season that Forrest had last year. And I think he's going to get, like, if Martin can't take that nickel spot, I think they'll either try to get him in there or what you said earlier, and I think you're right. They'd prefer Cam to stay in strong safety more, but they probably can move Butler back and pull Cam up some. They're going to be, I think they'll be able to do a lot of interesting things this year that I'm kind of fascinated to see. So we talked about the 6.5 that Vegas put on. I think we both could agree that you smashed the over on that. Before we get out of here, tell me what you think the number is and what makes for, like, even if they don't hit that number, what makes for a good season? When the season's over, like, all right, I can work with that.
I think at minimum 9 wins. I feel like we're due for at least. I mean, technically, you just take that tie away, just give us 0.5 more wins than last year, just off of the going from Scott Turner to Eric Bieniemy, from Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke to Sam Howell, improved secondary, healthy Chase Young. Hopefully, this offensive line is better or at the very least healthier. I feel like all of that should at least get you another half game in the win column. So I'm saying 9 and make playoffs. I'm only satisfied with the playoffs with all of this talent on this team. It has to be playoffs or bust. I think even for Josh Harris, he's all smiles and when he's in front of the camera. But I'm pretty sure he's looking at Rivera and company like, you need to show me something this year, or we're gonna go ahead and I have my eyes on a few other guys, and we'll bring them in to replace you.
You know it. This is going to be a very interesting year and a pivotal year because you're right. If they don't do other blow the whole thing up, and as excited as that could be, sometimes you be careful what you ask for, right? Because the things haven't been terrible under Rivera. You never know what the next guy may bring. But it can also be very exciting. I think they've got to your point, and it feels like all those things you mentioned should be good for a half a win,
At least.
at least. It was been too long since we've done this, man. This was a great conversation. I appreciate you coming on today. And yours comes out every day. Is it at a certain
Yes, sir.
time? I know I
Not
see the
really.
post in the morning, usually.
Yeah. I
Okay.
typically I try to get the clips from practice out there as soon as possible so like people can see what happened and everything like that. And then the training camp breakdown, just depending on how my day goes, how long it takes to edit the video, it can vary. But I
Right.
try to make sure I at least get it done every day. And if I don't, I'll just combine my notes for the previous day and then that day and just do like the review of two practices. But either way, I'm gonna discuss every practice that the training camp that the commanders have in training camp until we get to this period where they like completely shut everything down. They start installing the real offense. Eric Bieniemy's working on real plays and working on the playbook and stuff like that. Then we'll probably get like no information other than injury reports, and then I'll just be able to talk about what I can.
And then what does the vibe switch to once the season starts?
Oh, it's daily live streams during the game. I'll do my preview for the matchup that we have and things to watch for before every game. I have my game reviews in video form immediately after the game, and then I also have my live stream call-in shows where anybody, any viewer on YouTube can call into the show. Give everybody like a 3-minute timer. So I hope people come with like their ideas organized because at first I didn't have a timer, but then people used to complain that it took forever for them to finally get on. So I had to limit the people to 3 minutes. So I call in show after every game, 3-minute timer, come in, be as passionate as you want, be as analytical as you want, whatever, celebrate the win, boo Ron Rivera on a loss, whatever.
Well, I dig it, man, and I dig what you're doing over at the channel. So keep it up, and appreciate you coming on
Thank
today.
man, anytime, man. I mean, especially a fellow Georgia Bulldog fan, super
Let's
anytime with you.
take a couple. Let's take a couple minutes here where nobody else cares and talk about this thing. Who's going to play quarterback, and do you think they can three-peat this year? Schedule's pretty easy.
Yeah. So first, who they'll play a quarterback. It's kind of like the Commanders, a strong parallel there, where we know who the starter basically is. They're just waiting to announce it, just like Sam Howell, Ron Rivera, Kirby Smart with Carson Beck. Carson Beck's the quarterback. He got all of the backup snaps when we had such a severe lead on teams. Stetson Bennett, there was no point in playing him anymore. And then even in the spring game, we had Carson Beck look like the superior quarterback, even dicing up our elite defense. And then I think we have a great chance to three-peat. Literally, the only thing that makes me uncomfortable about the prediction is that it just doesn't happen before. But are we the best team entering this season? I feel like it. Alabama, we still they don't know who their starting quarterback is. It's like a two-way competition right now, and I'm not confident in either one. I mean, they had arguably one of the best quarterbacks, or maybe the best quarterback last year in Bryce Young, arguably the best defender in Will Anderson last year, and they still didn't win the championship, and they lost both of those guys. LSU is improving, but I don't think they're as good as us yet. Ohio State, same thing, lost C.J. Stroud. Can the next quarterback come in and pick up right where they left? Michigan's going to be really talented, but like a lot of people say, and I agree, Michigan's basically just diet us, and you can't do us better than we do us. As far as like just building the team top to bottom, great talent, great defense, run game, and stuff like that. Brock Bowers is only going to be an ascended version of himself. Dominic, the receiver from Missouri, I believe, he's Dominic Lovett. He's going to be great. I feel like he's going to surprise a lot of people. I think once Rod Thomas finally understands the offense, I've heard he's struggling with the playbook right now. He's a true X receiver. So I feel like our receiving core is better than last year. I feel like our secondary is going to be better. Our linebacker group, when healthy, is going to be better than last year. I think the only thing that we take a step back in is defensive line and really just interior because I think Michael Williams is going to be great. I think, and running back and interior defensive line are the only things where
running backs
we may take a step
all
back.
those backs are nicked up right now, right?
Yeah, everybody's hurt. Kendall Milton, of course, just can't stay healthy and all of that type of stuff. True freshmen, walk-ons are about to get playing time in games. But other than the interior defensive line and running back, we are better than last year. I feel like even to say quarterback, we have a higher ceiling with Carson Beck, and he looks to be really accurate so far from what we've seen. So I'm really excited. I think we should literally three-peat other than the fact that it just doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. God, it'd be nice to be the ones to do it.
Yes, sir.
All right, my man. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. Anytime, man.